and only Ian Beckles. Look at that. The freaking phone is right. It's horizontal. He's feeling good. What honeycombs? What is on the shirt there?
I thought it does look like honeycombs. It's Cookie Monster.
Oh, I like that.
So they're cookies. You see what I'm saying?
I like that. It looks good, man.
And no mention of the Tottenham Hotspurs at all. The whole time I was just waiting.
Did you see what happened?
What happened?
They played at 2:00. They had a triple header on Sunday. They scored 5 goals in the first half.
Let's go.
Everybody was like, hey, man, if you want people to really like soccer, like the Manchester Derby wasn't great. Like Man U, they're not doing all that hot. Man City's been terrible. They've only won 1 game in their last 10, which is crazy because they've won the league 4 years in a row. They're in big trouble. But Tottenham comes out after that whole game like, oh, y'all are paying attention to that? Here's 5 in the first half of that ass. And of course,
that's what we do.
Your guy's son doing his thing, of course, 32 years young. If nobody knows, Ian picked up Tottenham Hotspur during the pandemic when we were kind of looking for soccer. And go, not right now, but when you guys get a chance, go check out the story of Heung-min's son during the pandemic. This guy literally left Tottenham Hotspur to join the army. And then he was like the #1 sniper in the army. So one of the most talented guys that I don't think a lot of people know here in the Bay Area. Let's go. Shout out to everybody tune in. Jose Puro, Jeff Taylor, Chris Perdomo, Dave Terry, my man Jay Bird. How about them Bucs? Hammer, who's been tuning into everything that we do over the years. Fire those cannons. And then Jake Kobe and saying, what's up, fellas? Happy Victory Monday. Can I give Mike Muckaluckin Evans a shout out? Let's just start right there, Ian. You get Mike Evans involved early and often. It just seems like, and I know you want to focus on the run because I think that's one of the big adjustments that the Buccaneers made in the second half. Like, let's get back to running the football, right? But when you get Mike Evans involved early, he has the ability to make the big plays. And whenever Mike Evans makes big plays, it seems like the Buccaneers come out on top and win.
It seems crazy, but every time the Bucs win, Mike Evans is present. And it seems like if Mike Evans has an off game, the Bucs lose. So
right.
I think there's a correlation between that. Mike is our spiritual leader. Now that Chris went down, Mike is our best player and our spiritual leader. I think Chris Godwin might have been that earlier. But Mike Evans is he's one of those guys that, you know, being in sports radio as long as I have and talked about sports and the Buccaneers, I've been wrong a few times. I don't know if I haven't been wrong about Mike Evans a half dozen times, saying he can't still be the same player. And then he comes and then he does that. So everybody falls off except for Mike Evans. So maybe in 4 or 5 years he'll start falling off. But until then, I'm still a believer.
I want to give a shout out to a guy like Mark Sanchez because I thought he did a good job during the broadcast yesterday. And he brought up something I thought it was like a perfect analogy. He said Mike Evans is the Buccaneers' Larry Fitzgerald. And I just looked at it and I was like, you know what, man? Larry Fitzgerald never fell off. He was just consistent. He stayed healthy. He was a great dude on and off the field. And I was just like, damn, man. Sometimes I think comparisons get a little lame and it's like too much of a stretch. I think that's a pretty damn good comparison between the two.
I think it's awesome. And when I was thinking about Mike Evans and, you know, his legacy, if I bring up any wide receiver in the history of the game and I say, what's his strengths? I think he could spit it out right away. I'm not sure we can do it with Mike. Because if I say, do you think he's fast? I mean, he doesn't have the best separation. He's not the best jumper. He's just a competitor. I don't know what other way to say it. He figures out ways to get open when the ball's in the air. He catches the ball. He's just a competitor. And obviously he's a skillful cat. But I don't know if I've ever seen anybody get the most out of what they have. I'm a big, big fan.
Yeah, and it's like at times he has a case of the dropsies too, right? Like so you would never say like he has the greatest hands in the world, but he catches them when you need to catch him. And he's just a playmaker and a big part of that win. But yeah, I'm going to go back to the running game. It seemed like Liam Cohen was getting a little bit too pass happy there. And I just love the fact that Liam Cohen could check himself and be like, all right, let's get back to the run, whether it's Bucky, whether it's Rashad. And then, man, that really opened things up in the passing game. But I know that speaks volumes to you, and I know that makes you feel good when you see an OC go, let's get back to running the football.
Well, you know where I come from, Jay. I want to run the football all the time, and everybody keeps on talking about this is a pass-happy league, and you have to have this and you have to have that. When at the end of it, the teams that are succeeding are the teams that run the football. Okay, if you just throw the football, it doesn't work. And when you see some other teams out there, and listen, as Buccaneer fans, this is kind of new to us becoming a running football team. So I just don't know if we know how to deal with it. Okay, so everything is we want more Bucky, want more Bucky. When you're watching the Detroit Lions, the Detroit Lions have two legitimate running backs. So do the Bucs.
Right.
So let's stop begging for one of them when they're both doing great things. Because your boy Rashad has done equally as well as Bucky in the grand scheme of things, okay? I don't see Bucky running across the formation to make great blocks, okay? I don't see Bucky making the same reads in the pass game. Bucky is a great open field runner. Rashad's a tougher in between the tackle runner. He's a better blocker. But we have two great running backs. Let's stop asking for one or the other, because at the end of the year, we're going to need both of them to be successful.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Rashad White still averaging over 4 yards a carry. I mean, that's what you want from your running backs. And to me, as much as I know what Bucky Irving can bring to the table and how dynamic he is, if there's a guy that I want to run between the tackles, if there's a guy like when the Bucs are up in that game yesterday in the fourth quarter and there's like 8 minutes left, I don't want the ball in Bucky's hands there. I want the ball in Rashad's hands there, because he's a bigger dude. He's going to run between the tackles. Hell, I almost would want to see even more of a Sean Tucker in that situation, because those guys can take the physical contact a little bit better than Bucky, who's dealt with 3 different injuries this year. Over the entire game, the ability to pop off the big runs, I understand that, but the ability to get the tough yards, I'm with you. Like, Rashad White is a guy that you need him. You need guys like that. For all the talk about teams like Kansas City and throwing the football, the reason why the Chiefs have been good the last couple of years is when they need a yard, they get a yard, whether it's Pacheco or any of these other guys. They can run the football when they need to. And you look at the offensive line yesterday, I just think that line is just taking strides every single week, getting better and better and better. When you watch them, what's the biggest thing that sticks out to you about them? Is it the play? Is it the individuals? Like, when you see that offensive line, I mean, because that you have to bring your hard hat in your lunch pail if you're going to go and beat a team like Jim Harbaugh's team, because if there's any coach in the league that understands building in the trenches, it's that guy.
Well, I mean, the Buccaneers have beaten the Harbaugh team. They've beaten the Lions. They've beaten the Eagles. Give me 3 better teams in the trenches. I don't know if there are any, okay? So this Buccaneer team is starting to get that personality, whether, like, they're going to run for 150. And I've been begging for that forever. When you have Rashad White, when you have Bucky, they get all the love. But this Buccaneer offensive line may be one of the better run-blocking offensive line we've seen here in decades. So I want to give a lot of love to the offensive line. I want to give a lot of love to Liam Cohen for calling the run plays. And I'm going to tell you, and this is not just a particular to offensive line. All offensive lines want to run the football. Every one of them, 100%. They would rather run the ball 45 times than throw the ball 5 times, okay? So this offensive line right now is feeling good about themselves, because those games we have to throw the ball 50 times, only bad things happen as an offensive line. When you're running the ball 45 times, but I tell you what, you win the majority of those games. So I want to take my hat off to the offensive line, because they're playing their asses off.
And we know the trenches are obviously on both sides. I thought defensively, pitching a shutout against Justin Herbert and that team, a big reason why Todd Bowles was dialing up the pressure. And as much as I want to see more sacks from like a guy like Yaya Diaby, he was getting into the backfield. But, man, Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea getting that pressure. I mean, Kalijah Kancey made a play on Ladd McConkey on 4th down. Think about that. A guy that's going to play in the middle of your defensive line made a play against the best receiver on the other team on 4th down to get a stop. The versatility of those guys on the defensive line have been absolutely huge. And even though you're probably not getting as much as you want from the outside, I mean, you win that battle in the middle and you start bringing the pressure like Todd did in the second half. I mean, man, that's going to be tough for any team to be able to handle.
Well, listen, everybody would love to have guys in the middle pushing the pocket and the guys from outside wreaking havoc. Not everybody has that, okay? We don't have the outside right now. Yaya is an up-and-down guy, hasn't had the best year rushing the passer, although I'm not going to say he's not playing well. I mean, guys like Shaq Barrett, we saw them go through, periods where they weren't getting sacks, but you see them out there playing hard. When Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea are both healthy, I don't know if they're not one of the better, tandems in the whole league. They just haven't been that healthy too often. And, as a whole, this Buccaneer defense is starting to have a little swag to them. Okay, it's to me, they almost took it as a personal slight. Going to the West Coast and playing against a great defense. They were like, well, let's show them what we can do. And Herbert wasn't 100%, but the Bucs sure put it on him. And the Bucs offensively put it on a defense that's been really kicking the crap out of everybody this year. So that was by far the most complete game I've seen the Bucs play this year.
Yeah, it's a great point, because going into that game, the Chargers had the number one scoring defense in the NFL, giving up 15.9 points a game, and the Buccaneers put up a 40 stack on them. The one guy that stood out to me defensively yesterday, and I marvel at it still. This guy, Levante David, was absolutely everywhere. Who had the most tackles in the game yesterday for either team? Number 54, Levante David. He also had a sack and a half. He also hit the quarterback 3 times. He's 34 years old. And I said on Twitter yesterday, no, that's not 25-year-old Levante David. But Ian, there's something poetic about that game yesterday, where you could say that the two best players in that game for the Buccaneers, in a very tough place to play because of the team, the style of football, were Levante David and Mike Evans. Like, that was a turn back the clock type game yesterday for the Bucs.
Well, Mike Evans and Levante David are very similar towards they're ageless. Mike Evans will have that drop once a game. I don't think he had one yesterday. Levante David, at times, you'll see him trailing because he's not the youngest guy in the world. There was a couple plays I'm like, oh, look at Levante. Look. Then right after that, he gets a big sack and makes a big play. So you're always going to hear Levante David's name. If the Buccaneers are playing defensively, you're going to hear Levante David's name. That's just the way it goes. I hate when I hear people comparing him to Derek Brooks, because I don't think anybody on that will linebacker should be compared to Derek Brooks. But even to be mentioned in the same breath as Derek Brooks, Levante has to be feeling pretty good about himself.
Yeah, and I wonder, somebody said it because it's tough, because Levante doesn't have the Pro Bowls or the All-Pros to really make the Hall of Fame. But you start looking at the numbers that he has. I mean, his numbers, more tackles, more sacks, more INTs than guys like Luke Kuechly, and we know Bobby Wagner's probably going to get in there. He could be one of those senior ads, right? Maybe later on, like the Veterans Committee type of thing, because I don't know if he'll make it, but you can't say that there's been many more consistent linebackers in the game, in the last, 13, 14 years than Levante David.
Well, we know, Jay, the Pro Bowl a lot of times is a popularity contest. Mm-hmm. When you play on a lot of crappy teams, which Levante played, there's a lot of times where he probably deserved it and didn't get it. So, when it comes to the Hall of Fame, I think a lot of the Hall of Fame members would look at him and realize how great he was. But you still have to have that, those accolades. You still have to have, the lower tier. You have to have this many Pro Bowls, and there's exceptions here and there. But Levante David and Mike Evans, at the beginning of this year, if you said those are going to be two of our better players, I'd be like, that's getting a little old now. Like that, I don't know if that's still possible. But then that wasn't week 2. That was week 13 or 14, and we got our old ass players being the best out there. So I don't know how they keep on doing it, but they are.
Yeah, it's funny that the games that the Buccaneers win, you look at the teams that they beat early on in the season. When you go into Detroit and beat the Lions, you beat Philadelphia. I mean, Philadelphia wins again. They dominated the Steelers yesterday, and then the Lions lose to the Bills. The line, just so many injuries. McNeil, their defensive tackle, towards ACL, he's out for the year. Carlton Davis broke his jaw. He's out for 6 weeks. It just seems like all those good vibes from Detroit from last year. It's tough to climb back up the mountain again. And I wanted to get your opinion on kind of where do the Bucs stack up in the NFC. One thing that I said before the season is watch out for San Francisco, because when you get close to the top of the mountain and you fall short again, it's awfully tough to climb back up. Steve Eisenman said that many years ago when the Lightning lost in the finals in 2015 to the Chicago Blackhawks. He looked at us and he goes, you guys don't realize how tough it is to go the entire season, be one of the final 2 teams standing, and lose. He's like, you don't want to work out. You don't want to practice. The regular seasons don't mean the same. He said, you could say anything you want to the media and you can try to convince yourself that, it's going to be the same thing. It's hard to dust yourself off and to get back up there. San Francisco's done it now a couple times in the last 4 or 5 years. And you see this year, it's been an abomination, and they're not close to the top of the map when it comes to the NFC. after that game and seeing Detroit lose at home to Buffalo, where do the Bucs fit in the NFC? Are they? I think they're probably behind Philadelphia, but I mean, probably not too far behind.
Well, Jay, human nature is to overreact to one game. That's just the way it is, okay? A couple weeks ago, the Steelers are going to win, and then lose a game, and all of a sudden the Steelers are something that they're not. I think I'm a realist, and when I look at things, when I look at this Buccaneer team, I would ask you, who's the best team in the NFC, okay? The answer is going to be the Eagles, it's going to be the Lions, and the Bucs beat them both, okay?
Right.
Who's the best team in the NFL? The Chiefs, definitely. The Bucs had them on the ropes. The Bills, the Bucs haven't played them yet. But you can't tell me that the Bucs can't compete with these teams. I'm not telling you they're going to win the Super Bowl, but there's nobody out there that I go, well, there's no way the Bucs are going to beat that team. Like, on paper, San Francisco's a great football team, but on the football field, they're not that great anymore. So the Buccaneers right now, on paper, don't know if they're a great football team. But Todd Bowles, who I don't believe is getting enough love, is figuring out ways to win 4 straight games, and I don't care who they're against. And winning 4 straight games in the NFL is hard to do at any time. So I hear Todd Bowles' name to get fired a lot when he loses a couple games. I like to hear his name a little bit more, giving him some credit because he's doing a hell of a job.
Yeah, you think about it. You got to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. That's one part of being a good team. But also, you got to be able to go into tough places and win football games as well. I mean, you think about it. They had no Evans, no Chris Godwin. They took the Chiefs to overtime, right? And I know there's no consolations and there's no silver linings, but it also is a measuring stick. You kind of get an idea. Like, you didn't get blown out without, the scarring of just losing your 2 best offensive weapons on the outside. And then you beat the Chargers, the Lions, and the Eagles. So, yeah, okay, they may be a little bit inconsistent, but what they've shown is they can rise the level of their competition to take on some of these great teams in the National Football League. Are you scared at all about going into the rest of this season or the rest of these games? Because now they go to Dallas, Sunday Night Football, and then they play the Panthers and the Saints.
Well, I don't do scared too much. The Buccaneers, like I said, I think they can fight anybody. But it's football, man. Because football is about matchups. Everybody, once again, wants to go to the last game. Look at that team. It's all about matchups. In the college playoffs going on, people are going to look at different teams. And if you lose in the first round, that doesn't mean you're not better than another team that wins, because matchups are funny sometimes. The Buccaneers went to Detroit and beat Detroit in their house. And then they'll lay an egg against a lesser team. So football's funny, man. Football, sometimes we have a key player have some situations at home, and all of a sudden the aesthetics of the whole team changes. A team like the Raiders, okay, you lose Max Crosby, you're a different football team. And there's so many teams, you lose a player like Daniel Jones as a Giants fan. You see what it does to it. Actually, that's a bad example.
Yeah, bad example. They're terrible.
Terrible. It's a terrible example.
They're terrible at all. I'm actually. They just called me. I gotta go. I'm starting.
Yeah, well, you could probably play quarterback there better than Daniel Jones can. But for the Buccaneers to lose a Chris Godwin, okay, an Antoine Winfield Jr., and still be what they are right now, once again, Todd Bowles get my love.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, I don't think we talked about this last week, ironically enough. It was DeAndre Campbell leaving in the middle of the game. Did we talk about that last week? I don't think we did.
Nope.
I mean, it's such a tough game to play, and you need to have such a, warrior mindset. This is a guy that's been around the league. We saw him playing for the Falcons. I thought he did a decent job with Green Bay and played pretty well for San Francisco this year. And then here comes Dre Greenlaw, the heartbeat of that team. It says a lot when Fred Warner, who I think a lot of people believe could be the best middle linebacker in football, he acknowledges, Dre Greenlaw is the heartbeat of this team. It's kind of like the Evans Godwin thing we were just speaking about. And then DeAndre Campbell, when they tell him to go in the third quarter last week, he says no, and then we find out that he's getting suspended for the next 3 games. I thought they were just going to get rid of him altogether, but we don't know how the logistics of contracts and things go. But when you hear something like that, as a guy that's suited up for 9 seasons in the National Football League, what goes through your head? Because I know a lot of people are like, screw that guy, they should get rid of him. My first mind has always gone, since being friends with you, is I hope there's something not going on with him mentally, right? Like this is a guy he's been a decent player. This isn't a guy that's always been a scrub. He doesn't care. He's got a bad attitude. For the most part, he seems like a good guy, but he's just in a jacked up space right now. And to me, it could be career suicide.
Well, it is career suicide not going in a football game. Do I know it's a mental thing? No, it is a mental thing. If your boss says go in and you say I'm not going in, there's no other way to call it, but that's mental, okay? For me, there's certain situations where sometimes I'll see a player snap on a coach, or I'll see a player snap on another player. That happens. That's just human nature. That happens. Sometimes in the radio you see people snap on each other. It's just it's human nature. But when you see somebody give up on their teammates, okay, your coach is one thing, but if you don't go back in that game, you're giving up on every one of your teammates. You got to go. There's no. And I heard somebody bring it up the other day. They were talking about, I think Trent Williams lost a child or something, and there was a couple other players have been through some tragic situations.
Somebody on their team, Ricky Pearsall got shot. Charvarius Ward lost his 1-year-old. I think Trent Williams lost a child too. Like
Correct.
that team's been through the ringer this year.
Yeah, but they're on the football field. But they're on the football field,
exactly.
And you're not on the football field.
Right.
So how is Trent Williams, who lost a kid, looking at you saying, I don't want to go back on the gosh darn football field? What is he thinking of this kid? So once again, I hope the best for this kid. But if I'm an organization, I wouldn't put a penny on that kid again. Once you, like Roberto Duran, once you quit, that's it. You're a quitter.
No mas, for sure.
No mas.
What's going on at the digs this week, man, as we get closer to the holidays?
Well, we're preparing for a big Friday game with the Hoosiers and the Notre Dame.
Where's your confidence level at?
Faux. It's not high, Jay. It's not high. As a lifelong Hoosier fan, or until when I got there, I've seen what they've gone through.
Is it that, or is it because of Notre Dame? Because Notre Dame is a guy, like, if objectively you look at Notre Dame, you're like, they're another team that, like, they got great offensive linemen, they build it in the trenches. So how much of that is like, I've seen this story for Indiana before, but also acknowledging, how good and what makes Notre Dame so good?
I would almost rather them go against an SEC high-flying team than one of them nasty trench teams like Notre Dame. So I could be wrong. Listen, I told Marcus, if they figure out a way to beat Notre Dame, we're going to go to New Orleans to watch them play Georgia, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Let's hope. Go Hoosiers, baby.
So, Diggs, a lot of things going on there. Tell us about In the Trenches. What we got going on there?
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to do a little bit before, but I'm going to end up doing it after this. But In the Trenches, I put on every Monday. You can get everywhere you can get podcasts, and I just basically break down Buccaneer football and tell a couple stories, and that's about it.
Sounds good, brother. Make sure you follow him on all social media platforms at Ian Beckles. I appreciate you, brother. I'll talk to you later on this week.
All right, kid. One love.
One love to the one and only Ian Beckles, number 62.